Swimming against the current. Chapter 1, Chance Encounters and Misunderstandings. In the midst of a busy city, the noise never seems to stop. Li is a clerk at that convenience store, and her busy work every day makes her full of helplessness about the world. However, an ordinary afternoon unexpectedly changed her life. On that day, it was an ordinary day when she worked at a convenience store, and the sunlight outside the door poured in through the glass windows, covering the whole store with a warm layer of gold. Li was tidying up the shelves, and suddenly a tall and straight figure appeared in her field of vision. The man wore a dark suit with a cold expression, and walked with an innate grace and majesty. Li couldn't help but be attracted to him. She even forgot what she was holding in her hand, and she couldn't take her eyes off that face. He is Gu Xingyuan, an enigmatic upstart in the business world who has just returned from overseas. His face is handsome, but that indifference and condescending temperament is unapproachable. Li was full of curiosity about such a man, and she couldn't help but think, if she could fall in love with him, how happy she would be. However, she didn't realize at that time that this fateful encounter was already quietly unfolding. She just silently hoped in her heart, but she didn't know that fate would weave an intricate story for her. Chapter 2, Drunkenness and Impulse. A few days later, Li and her roommate Sujin attended a friend's party. The alcohol quickly made her let go of her control of reason, and the drunkenness gradually made her lose her usual restraint. As she staggered through the crowd, she accidentally bumped into a familiar figure. She looked up, stunned. Gu Xingyuan stood there, like an iceberg. Li lost her temper for a while, and said the words in her heart one by one, "If I can fall in love with you, how good it would be." After Sujin heard this, she immediately showed a surprised expression, but she didn't stop it. On the contrary, she felt that it was nothing more than a harmless joke. Li was so drunk that she completely forgot about this drunken confession. When she woke up the next day, Sujin playfully pulled her to recall all the things of last night, and said, "You picked up a boyfriend for nothing last night, don't be grateful." Li thought Sujin was joking, until she saw the 500-word essay sent out on WeChat. Her face instantly turned pale, and she hurriedly turned on her phone, wanting to save some dignity. In the end, she only sent a short sentence: "The other party retracted last night's confession." Unexpectedly, Gu Xingyuan immediately replied, "It's been more than 3 minutes, it's too late." Chapter 3, Reunion and Game. A few months later, Li is still running to save the factory that is about to close. The factory is a legacy left by her father, and for her, it's more than just a place to work, it's a part of her father. She needed to find the right partner, and Gu Xingyuan was her only hope. She has done her homework and understands the methods of this business tycoon who is resolute and ruthless. She said to herself that it had to all go smoothly, otherwise her factory would collapse completely. When she pushed open the glass door, all the preparation seemed pointless. Gu Xingyuan stood by the window, wearing a black suit, as if the focus of the world was on him. He looked up and glanced lazily at her, those indifferent eyes seeing through all her disguises. Li's heartbeat missed a beat, and his mind went blank for an instant. Her intended opening line vanished in an instant. The bystander spoke, breaking the stalemate, "Do you know each other?" Gu Xingyuan's tone was flat, but with an unchallengeable majesty, "I don't know." Li opened her mouth, but suddenly remembered those 2 words, "Shengzhen." She hurriedly changed her words, "Yes, we don't know each other." Chapter 4, Clash Again. After the banquet, when Li was about to leave, he was suddenly blocked by Gu Xingyuan. She looked up and saw the slightly drunk peach blossom eyes, and her heart panicked. She felt an invisible pressure and could barely breathe. "You said we didn't know each other first." Li cautiously reminded him. Gu Xingyuan looked at her, smiled lightly, and said in a low and dangerous tone, "I said I wouldn't break up at the beginning, why aren't you as obedient as you are today?" Li's heart beat faster, thinking of those days in the past, when Gu Xingyuan was not as indifferent as he is now. He once promised her that he would not break up, but finally chose to leave. Now, his every movement, every look, is like a silent provocation, challenging her bottom line. Chapter 5, Motivation and Strategy. As time passed, Li gradually discovered that Gu Xingyuan was not the simple person she had imagined. His unfathomable business skills forced her to re-examine the man. And in the process of her gradual contact with Gu Xingyuan, the subtle feelings between the two also quietly grew. However, Gu Xingyuan still maintained his lofty posture, and whenever Li tried to get closer, he would always push her away. His mind is like the deep starry sky, which is elusive. Li had to learn how to gain a foothold in this game, how to break free from Gu Xingyuan's powerful influence, and even how to break his icy defenses. She knows that this victory or defeat is not only about business cooperation, but also about the tug-of-war between 2 hearts. Chapter 6, Swimming Against the Current. With waves of challenges and opportunities, the relationship between Li and Gu Xingyuan gradually became complicated. From the initial misunderstanding to the later conspiracy, the collision of hearts between them may have been destined to explode one day. But the beginning of all this is only the first step towards her fate against the current. Chapter 7, The Dark Tide is Surging. As time passed, the relationship between Li and Gu Xingyuan became more and more strained. Although it seems to be a seamless cooperation on the surface, in fact, the dark tide is turbulent. Gu Xingyuan's indifferent appearance hides indescribable emotions, and Li is also getting deeper and deeper in this relationship. One night, Li returned to the office late at night, ready to sort out tomorrow's cooperation plan. She accidentally found Gu Xingyuan's private letters, which revealed some sensitive information about the future development of the factory. She was shocked. No matter what, she knew she had to keep it a secret. But just as she was about to put the letter back in its place, Gu Xingyuan suddenly appeared, stood at the door, and looked at her coldly. You should know that there are some things you shouldn't meddle in. His tone was low, with a hint of threat that was hard to ignore. Li's heart was beating like thunder, however, her face remained calm. She looked up and smiled slightly. I'm just doing my job. Gu Xingyuan stared at her, his eyes seemed to penetrate her heart. Do you really think you can escape like this? He walked into the office and closed the door, and the distance between the two sides suddenly became so close that Li could even hear each other's heartbeats. She couldn't help but feel an invisible pressure, as if the whole world was surrounded by Gu Xingyuan's gaze. Chapter 8, The Communion of Hearts. This night, the relationship between Gu Xingyuan and Li ushered in a turning point again. As the hearts collided with each other, Li no longer simply regarded Gu Xingyuan as a cold-blooded businessman, but began to understand his inner struggle. Gu Xingyuan's past is far more complicated than Li imagined. He once loved someone, but that love was broken by a power struggle. Since then, Gu Xingyuan has become indifferent to emotions and no longer trusts anyone easily. Li's appearance inadvertently opened the wound in his heart. His attitude towards her was both wary and longing. He knew that he could not continue to hide, but he was afraid of falling into the emotional vortex again. Li began to understand that Gu Xingyuan's indifference was not simply arrogant, but a deep self-preservation. There was a hint of sympathy in her heart, but this sympathy made it more difficult for her to choose between this game. However, fate never lets anyone go easily. Li knew that she had to choose the future she wanted, rather than being swayed by Gu Xingyuan's past. Chapter 9, Rupture and Rebirth. As the relationship between Gu Xingyuan and Li became more and more complicated, the final showdown came. On that day, Gu Xingyuan held an important meeting again, which was a critical moment for the future cooperation between the two companies. Li prepared a detailed plan and intended to go all out to seek cooperation in the meeting. However, an unexpected turn of events occurred at the meeting. After listening to Li's report, Gu Xingyuan suddenly raised an objection and strongly opposed the cooperation plan she proposed. Li was stunned for a moment and tried to explain her position, but Gu Xingyuan's attitude was extremely indifferent, as if he didn't care about her opinion at all. Mr. Gu, you are... The surprise and incomprehension in Li's tone could not be concealed. Gu Xingyuan smiled coldly. Do you think that we can cooperate happily and reach a consensus? You are so naive. This sentence was like a heavy hammer, hitting Li hard. She held back her anger and took a deep breath, deciding in her heart that she would no longer allow herself to succumb to Gu Xingyuan's coldness. Since you have decided so, there is no need to talk about cooperation. Without hesitation, she stood up and left the conference room. Gu Xingyuan watched her leave, a trace of complicated emotions flashed in his eyes, but he didn't stop her. At that moment, Li knew that she was no longer the girl who was swayed by Gu Xingyuan. She regained her determination and courage and decided not to let herself go with the flow. Chapter 10, Rise and Goodbye. A few months later, Li finally led her factory through the most difficult period, and she used her wisdom and persistence to win the recognition of the industry. And Gu Xingyuan has never appeared in her life again. However, on a chance occasion, the two met again. This time, they were no longer the strangers they had been, and there was an implicit understanding in each other's eyes. Gu Xingyuan looked at Li, and the corners of his mouth rose slightly. Do you remember what I once said? Li raised her head and smiled slightly. Of course, don't break up, but we never really started. Gu Xingyuan was silent for a while, and then said lightly, so, this time, are you willing to start again? Li looked at him, and an indescribable emotion surged in his heart. She knows that the ending of this relationship is not important, the important thing is that she is no longer the cowardly girl she used to be. She smiled and whispered, we should all live for ourselves. The tacit understanding between the two, like those words that had not been spoken in the past, became a part of the memories with the passage of time. And Li finally came out of Gu Xingyuan's shadow and started a new life of her own. Epilogue, Stream of Destiny. Li finally found her true path, although the story between her and Gu Xingyuan may not have a clear ending, but she understood a truth, no matter how twists and turns of fate are, she can always swim against the current and find her own direction. And Gu Xing Yuan finally began to learn to open his closed heart, let go of the past, and welcome the future. Two people may still live separately, but in each other's hearts, the once intertwined fates will never be forgotten.